Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn on the recording for this one. But this is a really, really good illustration of a specific point. The bigger your lens, Carolyn's lens is really big. It's a bird photography lens. So a sports photography, bird photography lens. So that 150 to 600, those telephoto lenses usually give you a prettier blown out background. But then they also, because of the construction of the lens and the mathematical formula for depth of field, they also make it very hard to ever get the background in crisp, clear focus. So the more millimeters of your lens you have, the narrower your depth of fields are, your area in focus, and the harder it is to get a nice fat depth of field. So when you're using a wide angle lens, it's much, much easier to get a real fat depth of field, a lot of area in focus, but it's much, much harder in that case to blow your background out of focus. So that's just something for you to think about. So you did a good job here, Carolyn. Real good.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, it looks like also by the time you get down to maybe f32 with this lens and it's extended all the way out and you're on the tripod, you're getting a little bit of camera shake in there. So good job. And then here you are on your water. And so here's 2/50th of a second, and you see that the water has started to form some nice crispness around it at 250. It gets a lot crisper at 500, but it gets crisp at 250. And then going through the scale, you're seeing that the water gets more blurred and more blurred and more blurred. But then you're doing a good job, Carolyn, because notice that you're keeping all of this area up here nice and steady and crisp. And then 15th of a second, the water gets blurred. And then by 1/8 of a second, we've got that blurred water. And then you went all the way to 1/3 of a second. So now it's even more blurred on the water. But notice now that this area is a little soft. And that's just because that lens on that tripod is really hard to keep steady when you've got a very long exposure. Questions? No? You good? Okay. Okay, Dave, here's yours. And I love this flower arrangement. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, it's just really pretty. So here you are at 4.5. And which lens were you using, Dave?
Hold on for a second. Just trying to read the lens here. It's 18 to 140.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this is just kind of your basic walk around lens, nice general lens. And you were zoomed. Do you know if you were back at 18 or were you zoomed some?
I'm zoomed in.
You're zoomed. Okay, good. Now remember that. So that's a little of what we were talking about with Carolyn's, that when you're zoomed in, it's more possible to make this background really, really soft. So that's once again called the bokeh of that background. And we'll talk about that just a bit more as we go along. But here you are at 4.5. Most of the flower arrangement is in focus, but look at the background back there. See how it's just nice and soft. So then that makes the photo pleasant to just look at, because all we're really looking at is the flowers and the arrangement and not going back and looking at the back. And then here you kept it going, 5.6, nice exposure all the way across. 7.1, same thing, nice exposure all the way across. We can start seeing a bit of the fence in the background right there. And then 8, a little bit more of the background is showing up. A good exposure, you're not losing it, you're balancing your light meter. And then F11, here it goes, seeing a little bit more of the background. And then 16, looking really good. You haven't lost your exposure yet. Everything's been balanced. And then 22, and then notice back here at 22, we're starting to see the tree detail and starting to see what's going on back there with that fence. So you did a great job on that one. You never lost your exposure on that one. So you did a real, real good job. And then here's your water. And by the way, these garden hoses work just perfect for this. It's almost the right amount of flow of water, you know, not too hard to set up, but 250th. And then here you can see at 125th, we're starting to get a little bit of blur on that water. And then 60th, notice at 60th, we don't have any definition in that water at all now. It's just become one steady stream. And then there it goes at 30th of a second. And same thing, Dave, all the way through, you're not losing your exposure at all. You're balancing it straight through. And then here we go, 15th of a second, you're starting to see that blur in that water, definitely here. And then 1/8 of a second, you went all the way down to 1/8 of a second. And then you got to, and you got to go all the way to 4th, didn't you, on that one? So you see that the garden hose is still nice and solid. The holder is still nice and solid. All that's moving in here is that water. And so you did dynamite job, Dave. Real good job.
Thank you.
And then this was just a comparison between the 250 and then the 1/4 of a second.
It's neat.
Yeah, isn't it? It's just it's a good illustration of how that shutter speed stops movement.
Wow.
So a real good illustration. And you notice too, we're not losing too much of the exposure. Exposure stays the same throughout each one of them. Okay, and then Jane, you had a problem with the exposure, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have to look at mine?
No, that's okay. That's okay. And so here you are at 4.5, and you know, we've got blurred out background in the back, but notice that the flower pot down here is nice and sharp focus. And so we've got the good focus point going on. So here's 4.5 and then 5.6, a little bit more of those impatiens are coming into focus, and then 6.3. And then here you got camera movement.
Yep.
So see how, so we've got camera movement going on here for some reason. And I think it must be wind because the flower pot is still nice and solid. So
maybe so.
Maybe a big gust of wind came through or something.
A tornado.
Yeah. And then here, it must have been a gust of wind because now, see, the flower pot's still in focus, but now the flowers have settled down just a little bit. So there must have been a gust of wind that came through. And then just a little bit more. You still got the same exposure though. You're still doing fine. And then here we are all the way at 22. And because your background's not a long way away,
right,
then it's not changing that much.
Right.
And then this is another good one that I want to point out. See these white flowers here? Remember at the end of class last time I was talking about the highlight indicator where it was blinking at you when you'd blown out the whites? And this is a real good example of how from the first picture all the way through, we never got good exposure on those white flowers.
Gotcha.
So when you kind of remember this picture, because this is a great example of what you should be looking for. We've got a dark flower pot, we've got dark leaves, and we've got dark bricks there. And so the camera, because we're primarily in that darker color, is going to perfectly expose those colors. But then that means that real white flower in that sun is going to overexpose.
All right. May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I'd been paying attention to the highlight indicator, those flowers would have been blinking. And then I could have changed the setting to go to a -1 or a -2 to make this a better photo.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And you probably wouldn't even gone -1 or -2.
Yes.
Because this would probably only need like a third of a stop underexposed.
Okay.
And then instead of balancing your light meter every single time, you would always make sure that you were that third of a stop underexposed.
I see. Okay.
So where we're talking about balance your light meter, put it in the middle, because this exposure, this setup needed a slight underexposure, then you would balance your light meter every single time slightly underexposed.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. But otherwise on this one, you did it. You know, you got that one that was a little bit on the blur side, but otherwise you did it. And then your fountain, your water, you told me in your email that you couldn't get it to balance, right?
I think I was the one that told you that because I was so frustrated
Oh,
with
was
that.
it Carolyn? Jane,
Yeah.
you could get yours to balance?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a minute there, mate. Do you
That-
mind repeating?
That's okay. Jane, did you send me an email telling me
I
you were
did.
having, yeah, you did. Okay.
Yes.
That you were having trouble getting this one to balance, right?
Yes.
Yes. And that's simply because starting at 250th of a second, this is a pretty bright scene. And I suspect you had a lot of light this day. And
Yes.
so you could probably get it balanced now, but then your next shot, you're starting to get hot already.
Yeah.
And then
It
I
just
noticed
got worse.
it got worse, exactly. And you said in your email that you changed your ISO to auto. And by this time, the camera had tried to do something which was absolutely not the best choice to make. So the camera is just jumping your ISO sky high. So 1280 would be what we needed in a dark room. And
Holy cow.
it just sent your ISO sky high,
Yeah.
trying to help you.
So what was I doing wrong? What was I doing wrong?
It was just too bright outside to do the exercise because you
Would it
probably had a lot of reflected light coming out of the swimming pool,
Oh,
plus
yeah.
a lot of direct sunlight. And
Yes.
so this is one that probably needed to be done at another time of day.
Okay. And actually, this probably was, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm going to guess it was around 7 in the evening.
Oh, in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then it shouldn't look like this at all. Then at 7 in the evening, you should have been able just to continue right on lowering your ISO. I mean, your shutter speed and balancing your light meter. Yeah.
I was obviously off.
Yeah.
Would it have made a difference with a different lens?
No,
Okay.
you're perfectly fine. I think what happened is once you put that auto ISO on, because
Yeah.
I'm not even going to show the rest of your pictures, but all of
Thank
them are
you.
overexposed. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is just the better of them right here. So this just kind of gives you an idea. But I think what happened is it raised your ISO so high that it was preventing you from doing what you needed to do. And
I
once you
gotcha.
put auto ISO on, it
Yeah.
balances your light meter for you with the ISO. So you couldn't even move your f-stop and shutter speed with any control.
Right. Should I try this again and see how it comes out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Try it again.
I'll send them to you and see what you say.
Yeah. See, by this time, and see, then the ISO had dropped down to 500 by this time. So keep that ISO on 100 or 200, and 7 o'clock at night, you should be able to do this with ISO 100 easily.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's your lesson on auto ISO. So,
I was
watch
totally
out.
frustrated.
Yeah, I could see because that would be really frustrating because they just got so overexposed. Yeah.
So Kathy, and I asked you this in an email, but so the first exercise where we set the f-stop first, we could adjust the light meter. However, on this one where we set the shutter speed first, you can't adjust the meter, right? Mm-hmm. Because it kept changing my shutter speed.
No, because if you're in the manual mode, once you set one shutter speed, like Trisha did right here, 250. Once you set one shutter speed, then there's one f-stop that goes in to balance that.
Okay, and it has nothing, but your light meter is of no use.
No. It's still, you're still using your light meter. Yeah.
Well, I could never get it to go to 0. Anytime I would try to change the light meter, it would change my shutter speed. And that's what I had wanted. I didn't want to change the shutter speed.
Well, remember, you're balancing your light meter with your f-stop and your shutter speed. So once you dial one number in, you have to take, if you dial shutter speed in first, then you have to take f-stop to find where it'll put your scale right in the middle. And you've got two numbers. If you start your f-stop first, then you got to find the shutter speed that'll put your scale right in the middle.
Okay, I need to practice that.
Yeah.
And
So
do you find that by changing the light meter dial, or do you find that by kind of just going through all the different f-stops and seeing which one balances the light meter?
Well, see, it's the f-stop or the shutter speed that's balancing the light meter. So you're controlling where that little scale goes in the middle by either using your f-stop or using your
Okay.
shutter speed. Yeah. And I gave you one. Now you got to find the one that puts it right in the middle.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So the light meter is being balanced by your f-stop and your shutter speed.
Okay.
Yeah. Or your shutter speed. So this is a good one. Tricia, how are you doing? This is a good one on Tricia's. You see that I told you to start at 250. Well, because it was so bright, she had to go all the way to F11 to get it to balance. So her starting point is F11 because it's so bright. And it was hot out there, wasn't it, Tricia? You're on mute.
Yes, it was terribly hot. And I ordinarily would have gone to one of the pretty fountains in the neighborhood, but I'm like, no, it's like 99. I'm staying in.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You know, garden hose works really well. Yeah. So here she is at 250 F11. So this means, you know, she's already moved all the way down the f-stop scale just to try to close that aperture enough to get a 250th of a second.
Mm.
And then here she goes to 1/25th of a second, but notice you still got the same exposure, Tricia. So you're doing absolutely right. And then going to 60th of a second. And this is a lot of water where Dave was using just kind of a garden hose flow, but this is a lot of water. And Jane, you probably noticed the same thing on that swimming pool. That was a whole lot of spray.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's a little harder to see the water blurring. And then here going a little bit more blurred water, but everything else is nice and solid. So Trish, you did absolutely fine. Everything else is looking good. So camera handling on tripod is doing really good. And then here you are all the way to a 15th of a second and still balancing your light meter. Notice that these porter weeds back here are now blurring. So the little flowers in the breeze are now blurring.
Mm.
So that's at that 15th of a second, but you're keeping the camera nice and steady. So on your tripod, you're working good. So that's 15th of a second. And then here is your little crystal ball, little glass ball. And this is your 5.6. And see, we've got a good blurred out background back in here. So doing just what you're supposed to be doing. And then that would be your 6.3, getting a little bit clearer in the background. But notice we've still got the same exposure all the way through. And then here you kind of lost it. Your focus point went back here. So crystal ball now is out of focus, but focus point's back here. So you got to watch those focus points. Came back, you got it. There you go. And then you got it again. And this is F29.
That's as high as I could go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never could get to the 32.
Well, because you're zoomed out on your lens, so that wouldn't have let you go to 32. So only when you're zoomed back on your lens could you go to 32. But then Tricia, you got something that's really cool. So I got to show this to all of you all. I blew her picture up. You see this starburst right here? Okay, and we're not even talking starburst in this class, but starburst is a wonderful thing for you all to learn, because once you learn how to do a starburst, you'll do them a lot. When you see that real intense sparkle on something that's glass like this, or even the sun in the sky, if you go to your smallest aperture, so your f22, 29, or 32, so you close that aperture down to its tiniest opening, and then include that glare of that sun, or point the camera right at the sun. Don't look in the viewfinder, of course, but you know, compose the scene up so the sun's there. If you've got your smallest aperture, then that'll give you a starburst on your sun. So this is a great thing when you're traveling and, you know, the sunlight's really bright and hot, but you still want to, you know, take the shot. If you can balance your light meter with that smallest f-stop, then that'll give you that starburst on the sun. So nice little side light there, or side thing there. Thanks. Okay, so you did good job on that one too. Okay, questions on those homework assignments before we start working for today?
Carolyn, Kathy, this is Carolyn, and I did have the thing that means that I can't stay for the rest of the class, so I'll have to do it on the next class. So I'm going to leave right now.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. And I've got recording for you, okay?
Good. Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep. So you might find you don't even need to come back to the other class.
Okay.
Okay, so everybody's got your cameras in your hand and your cameras turned on. Okay, so let's talk about some of the automated features on your camera. And you've got your handout too from last class or last time so that you can take some notes there. So you've probably already realized that in the manual mode, it takes a little while to dial that f-stop in and dial that shutter speed and put that scale right in the middle. So it takes a little bit of time for you to do that. But I want you to stay in the manual mode until you start feeling real comfortable telling yourself why you're using a 1/25th of a second or why you're using an 1/8 of a second or until why you're using an f/22 versus an f/4.5. So once your internal dialogue, you can kind of rationalize why you're using these settings, and you're always getting that light meter in the middle because the light meter always balances. You know, the light sometimes was high for you all when I gave you a certain number. Your light meter was hard to balance with that number, but there is always a place where your light meter will balance, even in the total darkness. So once you get to the point where you feel comfortable in the manual mode, dialing that f-stop in and dialing that shutter speed and putting that scale right in the middle, then that's time for you to graduate. Because there are some automated modes that make your life easier for you. So cameras turned on, right? Everybody's got your camera turned on. And then your f-stop's at 5.6. Yep. Okay, everybody at 5.6? Okay, now I want you to rotate the dial up on the top of the camera to A. Or AV. It's A for you Nikon users and AV for you Canon users. So it's A for you Nikon users and AV for you Canon users. Okay, so everybody's on A up on the top? Okay, now point your camera around the room and just autofocus on anything you want. Just, you know, point your camera around and autofocus. And you notice now that your f-stop does not change, but your shutter speed is changing. Notice that? And so if you point your camera at the window, you're getting a faster shutter speed. And if you point your camera at the floor, you're getting a slower shutter speed. You see?
Mm-hmm.
And do you see your light meter scale inside the viewfinder? So Jim says yes. Trish says no.
Yes.
Jane says yes.
Yes.
David says no.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So when you look through your viewfinder in aperture priority, Nikon does not show you your light meter. Canon does show you your light meter. But your Canon users, your light meter is right in the middle, correct?
Yes.
Correct?
It is, yes.
Good, good. Now take a couple of pictures. Just point your camera around the room and just click a couple of shots. And when it's down at the ground, you'll get a slow shutter speed. When it's out at the window, you'll get a fast shutter speed. So you got to hold your camera accordingly. And you notice now on the back of the camera that they look just like they're supposed to. Right?
Yes.
Same
Amazing.
light, you know, they're not great pictures, but it's, you know, it looks like it does in your house. Correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So
Mine looks really dark.
yours looks very dark. Now, is your
Yeah,
light meter
compared-
showing up, Trisha?
No,
No? When you look through the
No.
viewfinder, it's not showing up?
no.
No?
It says 200, 160, 200, 160, and then it says F5.6.
Okay. Is your ISO at 100 or 200?
Let's see.
Because you have the Nikon 5100. Is your ISO at 200?
It is at 200.
Okay, good, 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 good. And then when you point it over at the window, it looks okay. The picture looks okay. Take a picture.
Yeah, the inside of my house looks really dark and the outside looks pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So it's just dark inside your house. That's why it was dark. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so aperture priority. Here's when you would use aperture priority. And by the way, the two Nikons, you all have no light meter showing. The two Canons, you all have a light meter showing, but it's right in the middle, correct?
Correct.
Yep. Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. Now, why you would use aperture priority? You would use aperture priority when you know which f-stop you want to use. So I'm going to walk around a bluebonnet field and I'm going to do just portraits of bluebonnets. So nice little bluebonnet sticking up there. I want a nice blurred out background. What f-stop would I use if I wanted a blurred out background?
.5.
You got it.
Or-
Exactly. Exactly. So I'd use 4.5 or 5.6. So I'm just going to walk around the field and just do bluebonnets. Or right now we've got those beautiful sunflowers that are out everywhere and coreopsis that are out everywhere. So if I were going to just walk around a field and just photograph those wildflowers with beautiful blurred out backgrounds, then I would do aperture priority and 5.6. And now I can just walk around and just photograph. Now, doesn't mean that it's a get out of jail free card, because I still have to watch my shutter speed to make sure my shutter speed is fast enough to stop the wind from blowing the wildflowers. And then I still have to watch my highlight indicator to make sure that I'm not overexposing any of my wildflowers, so that then any of the whites on the flowers isn't blinking at me. But then when I wanted to put my camera on the tripod and do an f/22 of the whole field, then I could still stay in aperture priority, put the camera and the tripod, change the f-stop to 22, and now I can do the whole wildflower field. So still have to watch the shutter speed. No get out of jail free card. I still have to engage my brain and think about what I'm doing. But that's when we would use aperture priority, when we know what f-stop we're going to use. Okay, so that's aperture priority.
Okay.
Now, another reason for using aperture priority is we're going to do a whole lot of landscape shots, and I'm going to be camera on the tripod, f/22. Or even, let's say I wanted to do some interior photography around my house, camera on the tripod, f/22, and now I can photograph the rooms in my house. Or, we're on a tour in a museum or something like that, and we want to do some photography. Aperture priority, f/8, make sure I've got a fast enough shutter speed that I can hand hold it. And then, I can just photograph from there on, just go crazy with it. I shoot.
Why would you use 22 in your house? I'm sorry.
If I wanted to show all the depth of field of the room and I'm on a tripod.
Okay.
Because remember, when we're on f/22, that's a real small opening. So we're probably going to have to be on a tripod anytime we're using f/22, unless we've got a lot of sunlight outside. Now, aperture priority, I'm going to challenge you for just a second with this. I use aperture priority almost 100% of the time. So if I'm shooting birds, I set my f-stop at 5.6 or 6.3 based on how big that bird is, or even f/8 based on how big that bird is, because I need enough depth of field to cover the bird. And then I watch my shutter speed to see if that's fast enough to stop the bird. If it is, I just keep right on shooting. If that's not a fast enough shutter speed, then I put my finger on my ISO button and raise my ISO. Had a frog. So if I don't have a fast enough shutter speed to do what I want to do, then all I do is raise my ISO. Now, Jane and Jim, on your cameras, if you'll put your right hand on your camera, you'll notice that your ISO button is right up by your index finger, and it has a little raised dot on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Oh.
Tricia and David, you'll notice that your ISO button is on the back of your camera, and you can use it with your left thumb. See that?
Yes.
So your camera manufacturers have designed this so that when you're looking through the viewfinder, you can easily find your ISO button and raise it or lower it. So by shooting aperture priority all the time, I'm setting the f-stop, but I'm watching the shutter speed. And if that shutter speed's not fast enough for me, then I'm raising my ISO.
Interesting.
So this sounds,
So
yeah, go ahead, Tricia.
when we were doing our assignments and we weren't able to bring it to 0 on the light meter, then maybe adjusting the ISO would have helped us.
No,
Oh.
in real life, you're not dictated one number, but yes, if in the aperture exercise, when you weren't able to balance your light meter, which you all were, then raising your ISO might have helped you to get the right shutter speed. But in your exercises, I really just wanted you all to just move right through the exercises. Now, unfortunately, in that shutter priority, our sun was really, really bright last week. And so starting at that 250, it just didn't give us enough room to play around with. So aperture priority is where you know what f-stop you want to use. And now you're watching the shutter speed accordingly. So you've got, I think all of you all are, most of you all, I've seen a pet walking around your camera somewhere throughout these things. So you're walking around and you want to photograph that cat or that dog in the house because they're doing something cute. Then you're going to want to blur out the background. So that would be a 5.6 as your starting point. And then you would, get down and point your camera at the pet. And then now you need to determine whether that's a fast enough shutter speed or not. And if it's not a fast enough shutter speed, then you would raise your ISO. And remember, shutter speed, 60th of a second stops a living creature. See that? So if it's not a fast enough shutter speed, then you would raise your ISO. So that's aperture priority.
Nice.
Now, rotate the dial to TV if you're a Canon user, or S if you're a Nikon user. So up on the top, rotate your dial to TV if you're a Canon user, timed value, or S, shutter priority, if you're a Canon user. And now I want you to point your camera at the window or the brightest area of your house, your room. Okay, everybody ready? Shutter priority, S or TV. And I want you to point your camera at the window or the brightest area. And now, by the way, your main dial is going to control your shutter speed. Your other dial used to control your shutter speed, and now your main dial is going to control your shutter speed. So when you rotate your dial, Canon's at your front dial, Nikon's at your back dial, I want you to put your shutter speed, this controls your shutter speed. Set your shutter speed to 250. And then point your camera out the window. What f-stop does it give you when you point your camera out the window at 250?
4.5.
4.5, good.
4.
4, good. Jane?
I have a 4.0 and it's blinking. Why is it blinking?
Good. 4.0 and it's blinking. Jim, what'd you get?
I'm still working.
Okay, shutter priority.
Slow.
I said 250, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then is anybody else getting a blinking f-stop?
I'm getting
Yes.
a blinking 3.5.
You're getting a blinking 3.5. What are you doing, Dave?
I got a blinking 4.
Good. Tricia?
I have a 4.5, no blink.
No blinks. Okay, good, good. So she's got a pretty bright window. That shutter priority You set the shutter speed. You're now in charge of setting the shutter speed in shutter priority. It balances the light meter for you with the f-stop. And if it can't balance the light meter, the f-stop blinks. Notice also when you look through that viewfinder, everybody look back through your viewfinder, does your light meter scale show up or no show up?
It does show up.
Does
It
show
does
up.
show up.
Does show up.
It does.
Does. Okay, Tricia, same thing, does show up?
No, it does not.
It does not. Okay, once again, it's balancing your light meter and you're balanced so that light meter's not showing up. But everybody else with a blinking f-stop, your light meter's showing up. And it's trying to warn you that I'm having a problem here. I need your brain. I need you to fix me. That's why your f-stop is blinking at you. If you want to rotate your shutter speed to 500, you'll notice that it still blinks at you. So rotate your shutter speed dial to 500, point your camera out the window, and you'll notice that it still blinks at you. So it's trying to get your attention. Tricia, did yours finally start blinking?
Yes, it's a blinking F4.
Okay, good. So everybody now, that camera is trying to warn you. I will take your picture if you want to. You've told me to use 500th of a second shutter speed. I got a problem. I'm trying to warn you, but I'll take it if you want to. So shutter priority will let you take the picture, but it's trying to warn you that it's got a problem when you see the f-stop blinking at you. So if you would look through the camera again, point your camera out the window and rotate your shutter until the f-stop quits blinking at you. So Tricia, you already know what the answer is on this one. So rotate your shutter speed until the shutter quits, or the f-stop quits blinking at you. What shutter speed?
I go all the way up to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mine's 320.
320.
Am I going down or up?
You're going down, slower.
Mine's 20.
Oh,
20, good.
15.
15, good.
30.
30th, good. Now, if you remember from last week when we first balanced our light meter in your house, then you all were getting that 15th of a second shutter speed, 20th of a second shutter speed, 8th of a second shutter speed. That's because it's dark in your house. Now, point your camera on shutter priority back over away from the window and rotate your shutter speed dial again until the f-stop quits blinking. So point it either on the floor or away from the window, one of the dark areas of your room. And when your shutter speed quits blinking at you, or excuse me, your f-stop quits blinking at you, what shutter speed do you have? And take the picture, by the way.
It won't focus.
It won't focus. So it's having trouble focusing. Find something that you can focus on. Turn around and there's some words on something behind you. See if you can focus on that. What'd you get it to balance on, Jim?
2 inches.
2 inches. That's two seconds. David, what'd you get it to balance on?
3.
3. Good. Jane?
0 quotation mark 8.
Okay. Yeah, 1/8 of a second. Yeah. Trish, did you finally get that to focus?
Yes, my focus thing wasn't working because I was focusing on a blank wall.
Oh, okay. That's why it wasn't working. Exactly. It needed something to focus on. Lesson learned there. Okay. So shutter priority, you see that shutter priority, you would use this when you knew what shutter speed you wanted to use. You knew what shutter speed you wanted to use, and now you're following with the f-stop. I don't use shutter priority very often. I use it for 2 things, and I'll show you one of those in just a moment, but I don't use shutter priority very often. And the reason that I don't use shutter priority very often is because when I set a specific shutter speed and look through the viewfinder, then I've got that f-stop telling me I can't find it. I can't work. And so now I have to hunt for whatever shutter speed will make the f-stop quit blinking at me.
Mhm.
And then I might have to raise the ISO too. So to me, it seems like I'm hunting for two numbers. I set the shutter speed, and now I've got to hunt for the f-stop. And if that's not good enough, then I have to also hunt for the ISO. So I don't use shutter priority very often, but I would use it in a couple of instances. And I'm going to show you that in just a little bit where I do use shutter priority. So leave your camera on shutter priority for a moment. You can just put it down. Now, all those other modes that are on the top of your camera though, I don't use those, and I don't want you to use those. And some of your cameras might not even offer these. So just to give you an example of what these mean, do you all have these on the top of your camera? Anybody have the lady with the big hair, or the mountain, or the tulip, or the running man? Patricia, you
Yeah.
do on yours, right?
I
Jim,
do.
you do on yours? Jim, do you? No? Okay. Okay. So as your cameras get more advanced, they don't even give you these things anymore. But what these mean is that, for instance, the little mountain mode right here, that's just landscape photography. And what the mountain mode is doing is giving you the biggest f-stop you can get. But you all know how to do that already. What would you do if you wanted to get the biggest f-stop you could get? How would you set your camera?
A 22 or a
Yeah.
32.
You got it. See, you all already know how to do this. The tulip is the blown out background, the fuzzy background. So how do you get the fuzzy background? Come on, y'all know.
Like a 5.6.
You got it. You already know how to do this. So you don't need the little tulip mode. The lady with the big hair or the big hat, sometimes she's got a big hat. That's the portrait mode with a blown out background. So how do you once again get a blown out background?
A
5.6.
large aperture.
You got it. You got it. So see, you all don't even need these modes at all. And so all of these preset modes, once you know manual aperture priority and shutter priority, you don't need these preset modes anymore. None of you all have a camera that does this, but on this camera that I'm showing you on the screen right now, this is a Canon Rebel. And see this little green box mode right here?
Mm-hmm.
This little green box mode, some of you all might have a green box mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jane, you got a green box mode. Jim, you've got a
I
green
do.
box mode.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then David, on the top of your camera on your mode dial, Trisha, you've got pictures. Dave, do you have like a green box or something like that?
I have a green says auto, but I also have things that say effects and scenes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
So see all those scenes, you have all these things hidden behind the word scene.
Mhm.
And you see where you've got that green auto, and Trisha, I think you've got a green auto on top of yours too. This is where you have relinquished total control of anything to that camera. And so it is totally under the hood, automated settings, and you don't even know what it does. So it's just a total relinquishing control. Now, what happens in this Canon Rebel, and it won't work in any of your cameras, so don't try it. Just listen to what I'm saying. In that green mode on this Canon camera, you know the menus on the back of your camera where you've got all those menus, either atop the bottom or over on the top? In this Canon Rebel, there are 11 possible menus, and each one of those menu items has 6 or 7 things on it in the manual mode. If the Canon Rebel user goes to the green box mode, instead of having 11 menus across the top, they have 5 menus across the top. 6 menus that contain features that the owner paid for disappear, and they no longer have access to those at all, because the camera manufacturer assumes that you have no idea what those mean, so they're going to take them away from you so you won't make a problem. So here, this Canon Rebel user has paid for these features, but because they shoot in the green box mode, they'll never see them. So what happens as we move into any of these automated features is the camera manufacturers take stuff away from you so that you won't hurt yourself. And I now have taught you how to use your camera in the manual aperture priority and shutter priority mode, and nothing has been taken away from you. And so that's why I want you to stay in manual aperture priority and shutter priority, because all those other modes, the camera manufacturer just assumes that you can't learn anything, and you all can. So that's why I don't want you to go there. Okay. So there's all kinds of stuff in your cameras. I know it's there, but learn how to use the camera, and then you don't need any of those automated settings anymore because you paid for good cameras. Okay. Okay. So that's your automated modes. Everybody is still in shutter priority, right?
Mhm.
Okay, super. Now there are some features that I want you to use. So put your camera back on in your hands, and I'll have to tell you what each one of these are for each one of your different cameras. But these are some features I do want you to use. So the two Canons, Jim and Jane, you all have on the back, you can just look on your back display panel if you want. You all have AI servo.
Mhm.
And Dave, up on the top dial, you have CL or CH. And Trisha, on the back menu of your camera, you have autofocus C, AFC. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You see that, Dave?
Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah,
I see it.
okay.
Right. Mhm.
Okay. So everybody sees this, right?
Mhm.
Why I have you set here is as long as you keep your camera in AFC for Trisha, CL or CH for Dave up on the top, and AI servo for you two Canon users. When you autofocus on something and push your button halfway down, the autofocus will go out to whatever you focused on. And if you move ever so slightly, or the subject moves ever so slightly, the autofocus will go back and reacquire the subject. So if I'm photographing the kids, grandkids in the backyard, or I'm photographing a cat, or I'm photographing a bird, or even sports, if I stay in autofocus continuous, CL or AI servo, then and I can keep that little square, that autofocus square on my subject, then that camera will keep going back and refocusing on my subject. Okay. So
Mhm.
that's why I want you to be on autofocus continuous, Trisha camera, Dave CL, and then the two Canons, I want you all to be on AI servo. If you all go, and don't change anything right now, but just notice that this is one of your options. If you move to autofocus, one shot Canon calls it, or AFS as Nikon calls it, then when you autofocus on something, and then you gently move to recompose, or the subject moves, the camera stays focused on that point in space. And so now it's not focused on your subject anymore. You just told it to go out 8.3 feet and focus there. And now it'll stay there until you raise your finger all the way up and put your finger all the way back down again. So that's why I want you to stay in AFC, CL, or AI servo, because that way it'll constantly focus on your subject. The only time you would change off of that is if you were doing macro work where the subject was very stationary, and then that's a later subject, but that's the only time you would ever change off of that. Another thing that I want you to do is on your back of your camera, again, it's called your release mode. And this is the three pieces of paper on top of each other. And Dave, on your camera, this is your CL or your CH up on the top, and it's all combined in one setting.
I see
Okay.
that. Mm-hmm.
So the three pieces of paper on top of each other, this is called your drive. So the two Canon users, Jim and Jane, it's on that front button. You see where it says drive?
Yes.
Up on the top, on the front?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's one of your buttons. And
Mhm.
it actually has the three little pieces of paper in some cases. And then Trisha, it's on your back under your release mode. You see that?
I do, but I have mine set to S. Should it be set to pieces of paper?
It should be three pieces of paper, exactly. So everybody except Dave sees 3 pieces of paper on their little back display panel. So that 3 pieces of paper, when they're on top of each other, that means when you hold your finger down, as long as you hold your finger down, it'll keep firing. 3 pieces of paper on top of each other with an H, which everybody has. And then Dave, that's your CH instead of your CL. So if you put the H on there, that means this is going to fire as fast as it possibly can. Okay.
I don't have the H one.
You just have 3 pieces of paper, Tricia? Okay.
Right.
So that's as fast as you'll go. Now you all are in shutter priority right now, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That's where we left you. Okay, rotate your shutter speed dial to 8,000. Tricia, rotate yours to 4,000. Now, your meter is not balanced. That f-stop is just blinking away at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Okay,
Yes.
I don't care. I just want you to see how fast your camera will shoot. You're on the 3 pieces of paper with the H on the back of the camera, or CH, Dave, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Hold the shutter button down and just fire. They're all going to be black. Just fire. Hold it down. Fire.
Well,
You see how fast it's going?
yes.
See how fast it went? That's how fast your camera can fire. When you held your button down, did anybody's camera quit firing with your button still down?
No.
No? Everybody's good? Okay, super. That means your card in your camera is fast enough to handle the speed of that camera. So the card you're using is good. Okay. So if your card didn't quit firing and you get what's called a busy signal on the back because your card can't read it can't go that fast anymore. So it looks like everybody was okay if you didn't hear it jerking at you or you didn't hear it stall on you. So that's how fast your camera can fire in the event you ever needed to go as fast as you could. Okay. So Dave, you've got CL and CH on your top, and everybody else has the 3 pieces of paper. Jim and Jane, you all have the H. I'd suggest you leave it just on the 3 pieces of paper.
Okay.
If my camera says 1/4000, but the F4 keeps flashing.
Oh yeah, because you don't have enough light to do 4,000 right now.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
you didn't have enough light to do that at all.
That's why my rooms look so dark.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
those are all black pictures. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you didn't have enough shutter speed for that at all. You'd have to have very, very, very bright sunlight outside to do that. So that was just to show you how fast your camera will shoot. So as an all around, just leave it there setting, 3 pieces of paper on top of each other, or
Okay.
CL, Dave, on your camera. Everybody else, just the 3 pieces of paper. Yeah. But you'll notice, you'll eventually get a feel for it of what's one picture and what's holding the shutter down. We were doing a lot of bird photography on my workshop this weekend. I just got back like yesterday from the workshop, and we were doing a lot of bird photography. So when the birds would start moving or flying, then we would want to just be able to keep that button all the way down. So as long as you hold that button down, that camera will just keep firing.
So in a workshop, you continue to teach while people are actually practically doing
Oh yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. I'm talking to you the whole time. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. You get tired of me talking after a while. So just shut
I'm
up.
just wondering, where do I go from here as far as this is not necessarily something that's embedded into my brain. So
No, not yet.
I want to keep learning it.
Yeah. Well, at the end, I'll give you the classes that are coming up. And so you just need to keep taking classes. Don't let this stuff
Okay.
slip out of your head. Because if you put your camera down and come back 6 months later, this stuff's going to be out. So you got to keep going.
Yeah. I've been there, done that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the last thing on this one is whether you shoot with just one individual focus point or whether you shoot with a cluster of focus points. So I've showed you all already last time around how you can change it from just one little square to a big group of squares, or go all the way to big. If I were photographing big birds like brown pelicans flying through the sky, then I might go to a big cluster. But I'm a bird photographer, and if I were shooting little tiny birds through the leaves, then I would only want one individual focus point, because you want it to cut through the leaves. If I were shooting families and I wanted to make sure I was getting the right person in focus every single time, then the same thing. I would shoot with one individual focus point and move it around. Now, who's the most important person in a family group? Usually it's mother, because if mother looks good, everybody looks good, you know? So in your family groups, it's always going to be focusing on mother. But, you know, sometimes, you know, it's grandparent talking to parent, talking to grandchild, then you might want the focus point on the grandchild, or you might want it on the grandparent. But you can't focus on everything, because there's only one focus point in every photograph. And then, so that's where you determine whether you want a big cluster or whether you want a small individuals. I work on small individual points most of the time instead of big clusters. Because in a big cluster, the camera chooses. You're giving up control. So that's why I work in that little bitty point most of the time. Okay, so Trisha, on your camera, your 5100, here's how you pop your flash up right here, this little lightning bolt. So if you would pop your flash up on yours, and then on the Darla left on the, or Carolyn, I'm sorry, Carolyn left, but hers is the little button right here on the side of her camera. That's where yours is, right, Jim? And then Jane, you do not have a flash on your pop-up camera.
Correct.
And then Dave, you've got a flash on your pop-up flash on your camera, right?
Just did it.
Yeah, that's it right there. Okay, so everybody's got your flash popped up, and I can scoot through these just a little bit. Okay, and then Dave, on the back of your camera, this is something that I want you to do, if you would, please. And you're going to go to your little pencil menu and go to E1 on the back of the camera.
E1.
Uh-huh.
I have E, bracketing flash. Oh, I found it. Got it.
Okay, now go all the way up to the top to 1/320th auto FP.
I'm there.
Okay, good. Now get out of your menus and go to the back of your camera and hold that little flash button down with your finger. No. Just look on that back display panel of your camera. Yeah.
Okay.
And then hold your flash button down with your finger, and then move your flash to rear. So when you rotate one of the dials, it'll change these 0, 0 numbers. And when you rotate the other dial, it'll change this rear. And I want you to go to rear. Trisha, the same thing on your camera. When you hold your flash button down, you should get a little square that looks like this. And I want you to go to rear also. Did you find that one, Dave?
No. Oh, wait a minute. I got it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Now that, Dave, now we have set that camera's flash, and you don't ever have to do that again. It will not unset without you doing that.
Okay.
Okay. So back to what we were doing. Everybody's got your flash popped up except for Jane. And then, so Jane, you can kind of just follow along, unless you have a flash handy that you want to put on the top of the camera.
I might.
Yeah, just in case. Okay, everybody's got your flash popped up. Jane's gone off to look for hers. Now, remember I set your I set your shutter speed at 4,000 or 8,000. Remember that? Now, when your flash is popped up, what's your shutter speed right now?
I have a flash.
What's your shutter speed right now? Dave, are you still at 8,000?
No, mine just dropped to 320.
320, yeah. How about yours, Jim? What's your
I'm at
shutter?
250.
250, yeah. Trisha, what's yours? Trisha?
1/30.
1/30. Okay. So, but I used to have you at 4,000, didn't I?
Yes.
Trisha, rotate your shutter speed. Can you go to 4,000? Everybody's in shutter priority right now.
No, I can only go to 200.
You can only go to 200, exactly. Now, pop your flash down and you'll notice that you can go to 4,000.
That's interesting.
See that?
True.
Pop your flash up and you see that you can only go to 250 or 350 or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 200 now.
See that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when your flash is popped up or when your flash is turned on, and by the way, I have flash class on Wednesday morning. And so that's where I'll teach you how to use your top mounted flash in more detail. But so because there's a whole big subject here, but what's going on right now is that when you have your little flash popped up, that flash will only let you go to that 320 shutter speed or that 250 shutter speed or that 200 shutter speed, whatever shutter speed you could now go to. That's called your flash sync speed, and it won't let you go any faster with as long as your flash is popped up. So I told you that there was one point when I did use shutter priority. Rotate your shutter speed down to 60. So rotate your shutter speed to 60. And Jane, with no flash on, you can just follow along, okay? So everybody's got your shutter speed at 60th of a second, correct?
Yes.
Okay, flash
Yes.
is pop the flash up.
Oh, wait a minute. I had it at a 60th with the, yeah, okay, the flash is still there.
So everything's still okay. Flash doesn't mind you using a 60th of a second. This is how I would photograph people in my house at a party or a family gathering, because you see that we've already realized that you can't get a shutter speed fast enough in your house because you don't have enough light. But remember, 60th of a second stops human beings from just smiling or moving their head around or blinking their eyes. So if you would, those three of you that have 60th of a second with your flash popped up, just photograph like a coffee cup on your desk or a vase or something like that. Just photograph something around you, some little knickknack around you, and then look at it on the back of the camera and you'll see that it looks pretty good. Right? Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, these flashes are really, really smart. They know that when you focused on that coffee cup or that vase or whatever's nearby, you told that flash, only send light here and then turn off. So this is called a TTNL flash. And what this means is that wherever you focused, based on your light meter being balanced or not balanced, it knows how much light to send and then turns off. It's a really smart flash. Now that
So would it stop the flash if it didn't need any flash?
it would, if it didn't need any flash, it'll only send out a little bit of light. The more it needs, the more it sends out, based on whether your light meter is balanced or not. So that using that flash with that 60th of a second, then that would be when we would photograph somebody inside our house or something like that. Now outside, look at the picture that I'm showing you on the screen. Look down in the bottom left-hand corner of this graduation picture. Do you see how harsh that shadow is around that sculpture? You see it's got a definite line to it. So that tells you that her face probably also has some really harsh shadows on them. But because I've used a flash, and in this case, I can balance my light meter. So I'm in aperture priority here, or you could be in the manual mode. We don't have to do that shutter priority 60th of a second thing. But because I'm using the flash is going to fill in those shadows around her face so that I'm not going to get shadows on her face. Now go back to aperture priority, if you would, please. Rotate your dial on the top of the camera.
How close to her would you have to be in broad daylight for that flash to reach her?
That flash will go 8 to 10 feet in broad daylight. The top mounted flash, the external flash that you can add, will go 60 to 90 feet, depending on the flash you buy. But that top mounted flash, it'll only go about 8 or 10 feet. So, you know, so you make sure that you're that close. Now, you went back to aperture priority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Went back to aperture priority. You still have your flash popped up? And then notice, look through your viewfinder, what's your shutter speed with that flash popped up? So pop your flash back up. What's your shutter speed?
15.
15, good. Put your f-stop back on 5.6 if you would.
Mine's there automatically.
And put your f-stop back on 5.6. And when you put your f-stop on 5.6, you get that slow shutter speed, don't you?
115.
15th of a second, good. What you getting, Jim?
Depending on how I go around the room, I get like 1 to 4.
Good, good. What you getting, Dave?
3.
Good, good. So we're back to that slow shutter speed in our house, just like we've always had, right?
Yeah.
Now go back and flash that coffee cup again, or that vase that was on your desk, or whatever you photographed before. And remember, you've got a slow shutter speed, so you got to hold the camera steady. But you'll notice now that that flash goes out and just lights the subject up and turns off. So it's not like you've got a big glaring flash there. It's just going out, lighting the subject and turning it off. So in aperture priority, as I photographed this young lady here, I'm using the flash to fill in the shadows around her face, but you can't really tell that I'm using a flash here. So these flashes are really smart. And Jim and Jane, if you all don't own a flash right now, Canon, it's the 430EX2 or 3. And Dave or Trisha, if you don't own a top mounted flash right now, it's the 500 in Nikon or the 700 or the 900.
Okay.
So the 500 will do you just fine. And each one of these flashes will cost you about $250 or about $300. So you don't need to go to the real top of the line flashes. But what you do need to use is you always need to use a Nikon flash for Nikon camera, Canon flash for Canon camera. And why you want to make sure that you stay within your camera's manufacturer's flash is that flash needs to know how far away you focused. It's getting that information from your lens. It needs to read the light meter in your camera body. And that tells it how much light to send and where to send light. If you put a Sunpack flash on a Canon camera with a Tamron lens, you've got 3 different manufacturers' electronic systems, and that is never going to work the way you want it to work. So always, if you can, Canon flash for Canon camera, Nikon flash for Nikon camera. Okay. And then if you make sure you're using Canon or Nikon lenses as well, then you're really going to get good electrical connections. So flash, if you're working where it's getting a little bit darker outside, then if you can include some background light behind your subject. So we've got a lot of these public restaurants now have little Christmas lights all over the trees, or even in your backyard, you might have some more lighted areas or that type of stuff. As it starts getting a little bit more toward twilight, if I can put that background light behind the subject, then my subject's just going to look a whole lot better. And so, you know, if we can do that, then it's just going to help out a great deal. So in this case, for instance, we're out on the street, we've lost our light completely, but this is simply just 60th of a second, shutter priority, pop the flash up or put the top mounted flash, focus on the young lady, flash now knows how far to send the light, and then the lights in the background give us that background light. So this
So what did you
Sorry.
set it on?
This is just 60th of a second to freeze her. So you can either use this in manual if you want to, or you can go to shutter priority, whichever one's the easiest for you to do. And you see that I'm using a shallow f-stop. So you see how I've got like a 4.5 f-stop or something.
Mhm.
So the meter's not going to balance, but I'm using the flash to fill in. Jane, you had a question.
I was wondering when the flashes got this smart.
They got this smart almost 20 years ago,
Seriously.
but it's just if you know how to use them so that they're smart.
Yeah, that's really amazing.
It is. It's absolutely amazing. I got to tell you a real quick little story, Jane, since you brought that up. Famous photographer here in Houston was in the same room with me when I was going through this with a public audience. And he called me the next day and he said, if I buy you lunch, would you teach me how to use my flash? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, I don't have the foggiest idea how it works. I just goof around until it works. And then that's the only thing I know how to do. And so he had no idea that flashes had gotten this smart.
No, me neither.
Yeah, they're very good. Now I'm going to go back to this picture because I skipped over it. This is a genet in Africa. It looks like a cat, but it's really a mongoose. And it comes out at night under the rafters of the restaurant and it hunts for insects. So this is just too cute of an animal to pass up. So how do you photograph it? Shutter priority, 60th of a second, pop the flash up. And now when you autofocus on the genet, the flash knows how far to send light. That 60th of a second stops it from moving. And then if I happen to have enough light in the background to show up, then it will or it won't. So if there's not, like, you know, this is just lights on in the restaurant up near the ceiling. So that's why we've got a little bit of light in there. But this is the instance when I would use shutter priority. So I want to photograph something that's moving, not moving fast, but moving, human, animal, whatever. Shutter priority, 60th of a second, pop the flash up or put the top mounted flash on. And now that 60th of a second will stop that movement. And then
Have you done anything to this photograph to stop his eyes from shining?
No, no, luckily he's looking down. So you notice that there's a little bit of glare in there. If you have a pet that gives you a lot of red eye in Lightroom or Photoshop, we have red eye reduction and we can get rid of that in pets. So just in case you've got it. Yeah.
Look what I have. My husband
you have 40, 30, or 30.
I have it. Yes.
So you've got your flash.
Know.
Exactly.
Yes.
You've got your flash. Exactly. Exactly. So these flashes are really, really smart. Now, Jane, hold your flash up because your flash also has a top that rotates on it. Put your fingers on it and show them how that top rotates.
Do I have to push
You have to push the button in the back, yeah, and then rotate it around. So the good thing about having a top mounted flash is that that top rotates around. So when I went to photograph this Cadillac Ranch up in Amarillo for the Backroads of Texas book, I arrived on a day when it's snowing, cold, and the wind is blowing like crazy.
No.
The light is absolutely disgusting. And I don't know how I'm going to get a photo for the book because I can't do anything. So these people walked up with this beautiful dog. She's got this, great collar on and great leash on. And so I thought, well, okay, let me put that dog over to the side. I'll twist my flash over, focus over on the dog. So the flash now knows I'm sending light over to the side and it knows how far away to go. They're that smart because it's now pointed over to the side. And so now when I photographed, click the picture and let the flash hit the dog, the overflow of the flash also lit up all of the fluorescent paint. I mean, the sparkly paint on the cars.
Mm-hmm.
So see my flash, just, you know, serendipity. It's like, oh, look what else the flash did. So now I can go around and photograph these cars with a flash. And even though the light is disgusting, I can get that paint to light up for me. So your flash comes in really handy. It's always a good thing to kind of keep it handy. And that top mounted flash is a good thing to buy. So another thing that you might want to use to add light, this is called a reflector. And a reflector adds very, very soft light, especially to older women's faces. It is much, much more forgiving than a flash would be. A flash is really going to accentuate the lines and the wrinkles. There's sunlight coming in from the top right on her, and then down below her bottom left, we have put a reflector, and a reflector is just a very shiny reflective surface. You can use a piece of cardboard covered with aluminum foil if you don't own a reflector right now, or you can use that shiny windshield screen out of your car. But by putting that reflector down in that lower left-hand corner, it's reflecting the light from the window up on her face. And now we're lighting up both sides of her face. Window light on one side, the reflected light on the other side. And so this is called a 5-in-1 reflector. And you can get these for about $29 on Amazon. Get the 24-inch. So it's about 2 feet across when you unfurl it. Don't get the 40-something inch. It's way too big. And don't get the 8-inch. It's too small. So get a 24-inch. This little thing twists and it folds up into a little case. You put that in your camera bag and then you have it whenever you need it. And it has silver on one side, gold on the other side. And then you can take the whole case off and you can use it as a diffuser to cut the sunlight if you've got too much sunlight on a subject that you're photographing. And in the lady that I just showed you, she has a very peachy skin. And so I used the silver side because the gold side would not go well with her skin. If you had more olive complexion, you would use the gold side. And in this young lady, you saw her before, the picture over on the left is, as the sun's gotten more and more intense as the day has gone on in the shoot, you see how many shadows we're dealing with now. But then take the reflector and put it just off the camera to the left side of her and reflect that sunlight back on her. Still use the flash on her, but you know, the flash just isn't powerful enough to cut through these shadows now. But using the reflector plus the flash, I can light her up over on the right-hand side. So you see how good this reflector is?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good gadget to have. So another thing that you need to keep in mind in photography is this thing called flat to the film plane. So your depth of field, the area in focus, is absolutely parallel to the back of the camera. And if you look at your back of your camera, or you just look straight down on your camera, you'll see that the back of your camera obviously is nice and straight. Your depth of field goes absolutely parallel to the back of your camera. So whatever is in focus is going to be parallel to the back of the camera. If you tilt your camera like this, your depth of field goes like this. If you tilt your camera like this, your depth of field goes like this. So if I want all of these water drops in this calla lily to be in focus, I make sure that I keep my camera absolutely parallel to that straight edge of that calla lily. It's called flat to the film plane. If I want to make sure that this owl eye butterfly is absolutely parallel and totally in focus, I keep my camera parallel to it, absolutely parallel to it. So you see that the stick, the antennas, the legs, the two wings, absolutely parallel, absolutely in focus. But my background is nice and blurry, so that's showing you I've got my shallow depth of field. So this is called flat to the film plane. Practical of this, we're down in the Pontoise photographing the jaguars, and here's a caiman, and I'm using f8, which is a fairly big f-stop. but I'm looking straight down his nose, and you see that just the tip of his beak to about halfway through his nose is in focus. So with a telephoto lens at f8, that's all that's in focus. But if we pull the boat parallel to the Cayman
Wow.
and
Wow.
use f8, see, now everything's in focus. See that?
That's
Mhm.
fantastic.
So by simply keeping your subject parallel to the back of the camera and making sure that you've got the appropriate f-stop, this picture is much more dramatic than that photo.
Mhm.
And there's probably nothing that would allow me to go all the way from the beak to the eye without having to be f22, and then my shutter speed's going to be too slow, and you know, all that other stuff that goes with it. So this is called flat to the film plane. So
Wow.
be sure to kind of keep that in mind, flat to the film plane. This applies to those little kids because that face is absolutely parallel. That face is flat, okay? So roses, flowers, all kinds of other stuff is flat to the film plane. So be sure to keep that there.
What is the last word you're saying? Plane, P-L-A-N-E?
Plane, P-L-A-N-E, flat to the film plane.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an old film word. And then tripods, we've mentioned tripods several times, and this is my absolute favorite tripod, and it only costs $319, and it's a MePhoto Globetrotter classic carbon fiber tripod. You can buy these at Best Buy. You can buy them at most of the camera stores as well. You can buy them online. I will warn you that MePhoto, the Globetrotter, is being redesigned, and apparently they're hard to find right now. So if you find one, you want to buy the classic. And the MePhoto people make this in silver, gold, the little colors right here: silver, gold, blue, yellow, orange, pink, green. You can maybe find the purple still, and then they also did a camouflage. So they reintroduce it. They put out new colors periodically. The green was the only one I could get, so mine's green. The neat thing about
Why
this,
do you like it?
huh?
Why do you like it?
Why I like this, when MePhoto contacted me about 7 or 8 years ago and asked me to try it, I was only using very heavy $600 tripods, you know, that weighed a lot, because I never thought that a small tripod could be lightweight enough and still sturdy. This tripod weighs 3 pounds. It folds up, when it folds up all the way, to 1.5 feet. So that means when I travel, it goes on the top of my suitcase, and it goes right in my suitcase, and I fly with it. But why I like this so much is that 3.5 pounds, it extends to nearly my height. Then when I put my camera on top of it, then it's way over my head. So it's the perfect height for me. And then it comes as one self-contained unit, and everything works exactly like it's supposed to. So it comes with a ball head, which is what we use in photography. It comes with an Arca Swiss plate on the top of it, which is the gold standard of the plate mechanisms on the bottom of the camera. When you Allen wrench that plate on the bottom of your camera, it's not going to come off until you take it off. So you'd never have to worry about a plate that doesn't fit on, or it gets loose, or any of that other stuff. So the whole machining of this thing is exactly what we want. So for instance, somebody on the workshop this weekend didn't have one of these, and their plate kept coming loose on the back of their camera. And so, you know, it's just, if it's not the right stuff, it's not going to work. So this is my favorite tripod. Absolutely love it. I showed about stock in this company because everybody I know has one. Okay, so this is the MePhoto Globetrotter tripod. Now, lenses that you should think about buying. Just with your face, look straight ahead. Okay. And don't rotate your eyes one way to the left or right. Don't rotate your eyes up or down. That field of view that you have, if you look straight ahead, that's what we would get with a 50mm lens. So kind of think about that as your benchmark for your lenses, 50mm. But when we look at a landscape like this one, we rotate our head from left to right. We rotate our head up and down. And so that field of view, try it right now. Swing your eyes all the way to the left and all the way to the right and all the way up and all the way down. That field of view that you have is what we get with what are called our wide angle lenses. And then if you move your head from side to side, that's what you get with a super wide angle lens. So for, let me see, Dave, is your camera full frame or is it crop? DX or
It's a DX.
It's a DX. So you're full frame, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Dave and Jane, your widest lens would be a 16 to 35 millimeter lens.
Okay.
Jim and Trisha, your widest lens would be 10 to 22. They just give us different numbers based on how big the sensor is.
Mhm.
So your super wide angle lens like this one, this allows me to see the whole African plain. This would be for the two full frame camera lenses. This would be your 16 to 35. And then Jim and Trisha, this would be your 10 to 22. So
Okay.
this would be your ultra wide angle lens if you were going to do a lot of grand landscapes. So nice wildflower fields, that type thing. And this lens also, instead of holding your camera straight up and down, because this lens is so wide, if you want to accentuate the sky, you angle it gently backwards to make the sky bigger.
Oh, wow.
So this storm was impressive, but this storm is even more impressive because I've exaggerated by tilting the camera down. The nice thing about this 16 to 35 or 10 to 22 is I can also put the camera down in the wildflower field and it focuses very close. And then that way I can get close, I can get objects closer to the frame so people know what we're photographing. So this is your 16 to 35 or your 10 to 22. So this, in addition to your regular lens that came with the camera, this would be your second lens that I would recommend that you buy. And then lenses from there on depend on what you photograph, but you need to think of lenses as tools. My home handyman or my son or a lot of my friends who are very handy with tools, they can look at a bolt and know immediately what wrench to go get. They don't have to trial and error with it. Me, I got to trial and error because I can't tell what size I need. Lenses are the same way. They are our tools. And so if we're going to go do our landscape photography, then we want to take our 16 to 35 or our 10 to 22 on Jim and Trisha's camera. But if we're going to go do birds, then we want to take our telephoto lens. If we're going to do the kids at the at the playground or the dogs at the dog park, then we want our medium telephoto lens. So your lenses, you just need to get used to the idea of what lens do I need that will get me this picture. And that just takes some trial and error.
Give her some drops.
This is a little GIF that I created one day with every lens that I own. So I took every lens that I owned and I put it on the same camera on the tripod. And this goes from 500 millimeters to 10 millimeters. And you see when we get to 500 millimeters, that you can see the house, that building way in the distance, but when we get to 10 millimeters, you can't even see it. Wow. So what lens you use in each situation is all based on what you're trying to create. I own 5 lenses, that's it. And so I'm not a big go out and buy any lens just because somebody says that I need that lens. I need that lens if I need that lens as a tool. So instead of just going out and buying wrenches willy-nilly or hammers willy-nilly, we should be buying lenses based on what we need. If you think you're going to buy a lens, I would suggest that you rent it first. And we have a company here in town called Lens Rental. And so you can rent a lens. If you're ever going on vacation where you might need a specialty lens like an Africa safari, but you may not use that lens again, then I suggest that you rent it. And so in Costa Rica for the bird lenses, a lot of people just rent it before they go, and then they can see whether they really like that lens and really like using that lens. So I want to show you also the bokeh of a lens, because you might have heard me mention that term a few times through this class, B-O-K-A-H, Japanese for blown out or blurry. And so this is your 18 to 55 millimeter lens. Trish, I think you have probably one of these that came with your camera, if I'm not mistaken, 18 to 135, something like that. Yeah.
18 to 55.
Exactly. So this is just kind of just your basic old ordinary first came on the camera type lens, 18 to 55. I've got this at f4, and each one of the lenses that I put on now are the same ornament in the same spot. And this is looking out of my office window at the street outside. So you can kind of see the screen on the window out there, but you see how nice and blurry that background gets at f4. But watch what happens when I put a 50 millimeter lens f4. Now that background got nice and creamier. So 18 millimeter, it did this, and 50 millimeter, now it did this. Now this lens, one of its selling features is that it gives you very creamy backgrounds. So it's a tool used for that purpose. But then when I put my 70 to 200 millimeter lens on, and this is a professional lens, Canon makes them, as does Nikon. This is the 70 to 200 millimeter f4 lens, and I zoomed it out to 200 millimeters. Now look how creamy and pretty the background is. Wow. So once again, this lens is known for giving you that beautiful creamy background, and that's one of the reasons we would buy this lens. One of my favorite wildflower lenses is this lens, because it just gives me that beautiful poster-like background. So between the three lenses, they're all at f4, and the background is the same distance away, but the quality of the background is all based on the construction of the lens. And I hate to tell you, but in photography, the more expensive, the better it is. That's just the way it is. It's a shame, but that's the way it is in photography. Used lenses are always out there though. And so Houston Camera Exchange gives you a 30-day warranty on any of their used equipment. It's worth it periodically just to see, especially if you're looking at buying a lens that you consider to be fairly expensive. It's worth it to see whether you can maybe pick it up used and save some money on it. And a lens should last you, unless you're really hard on it, a lens should have 20 years of life. So there's no reason to shy away from a used lens. And if you subscribe to my newsletter periodically when friends are selling equipment and I know that they treat their equipment well, then I will list it on my newsletter so you all can end up buying it. Okay, so that's what I have for you all today. And classes coming up, you know, Tricia was talking about, we got to take more classes to keep this information in your head. Flash is coming up on Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock. And then crystal ball photography is next Thursday morning, the 24th. And if you haven't photographed with a crystal ball, they are a heck of a lot of fun to photograph. And it's just a, you know, new way to work your photography. And then I am doing a master class. It is more advanced, but it starts on the 21st, next Monday in the evening, and that's on night photography. So if you're brave enough and you think you're ready for it, dive in. It is more. It has four classes over 4 weeks with 4 homework assignments. So you're welcome to, you know, I leave that up to you whether you think you're ready for it or not. And then in the next couple of days, I'll put my introduction to Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Camera Raw. You need to process your pictures and you need to use one of the Adobe products, either Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw. I'll teach you how to use those. And then the next class after that is processing. And if you want to travel with me, Costa Rica's coming up in November. We've still got a couple of openings on that. The February trip has more openings on that one. And believe it or not, we are going to Ireland. We moved it to October and Ireland opened up and we are going, and we're keeping our fingers crossed on Spain for late September, hopefully. if not 2022, we'll have a complete travel schedule on that. And then also weekend workshops, I'll keep you abreast of that either on my on my website or on my newsletter. And when you all signed up for class, if you said join my newsletter, then you'll get my newsletter every 6 or 8 weeks. If you didn't, because I know I don't ever subscribe to people's newsletters, but if you didn't, just go back to my website and click on it and you could subscribe to my newsletter. Okay. And I'm on Facebook too and Instagram. So if you're there, make friends with me. I make friends with you. Questions?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
One of your classes that you just spoke about for, I forget what it was called, Lightroom or whatever.
Yeah.
Talked about shooting RAW, and I don't know anything about shooting RAW. Or what it means.
Yeah, RAW is your setting on the back of your camera, and RAW is where you take the full capabilities of your camera. So when you shoot in RAW, you have to have a processor for it to make it look better. But if you're going to work on your pictures, you can get a lot more out of them. You can fix a lot more errors if you're shooting RAW. If you shoot JPEG, the camera halved how big that picture was. And it threw away all of the pieces that it didn't think it needs, which we need later on to process. And so you're getting a smaller picture if you're shooting in JPEG. So if you're shooting in RAW, Jane's camera, for instance, you can get a 24 megabyte photo. Now, I know I can see kind of how old everybody is. Remember the first A drive floppy disks? Remember those? Okay, that was 1.4 megabytes. So Jane's camera now makes one picture is equivalent to 24 of the old floppy disks. That's a big picture.
You did a video, I think it was on YouTube, about comparing these two cameras for the purpose of birding, and you talked about the megabytes. I believe you said a standard one is around 50 megabytes. So I was like, well, my camera's old. Let me go back and take a look. And mine was at, I believe, 4.5 megabytes.
Yes.
So is that let's say if I had two cameras, one that I already own and one built today.
Yes.
But by Nikon, and say I step up a few $100s.
Yeah.
Would those two things alone make a difference in a picture?
Huge. And your camera, Tricia.
That's what my husband's telling me, that I have to have a new camera, and I'm like, I don't think so.
Oh, trust him. Yeah. So Tricia, for instance, on your camera, you're probably more like 10 megabytes, but you're only seeing 4 because you're shooting in JPEG, so the camera threw most of it away.
I see.
So if you shoot in RAW, you're going to see that you've got probably between 10 and 18 megabytes.
So could I take the same picture and flip between JPEG and RAW just to show myself the difference?
You should, but what you'll notice is when you're processing them. So your JPEG is a finished picture, so you really can't process it that much. But your RAW, you can process a lot. You can fix a lot of problems in the event that you have them. You can make it look a whole lot better.
I've never used a processing program, so I don't know anything about them.
When you
do you have a second level of course that follows basic?
So any of your classes after this in photography, I'm going to just repeat all this basic stuff and move you one step further. So that's why you should just start taking all the classes after this. I'll put a whole schedule on. So we're wrapping up the end of my schedule that I just put on. So I'll put a whole lot more on. But yes, if when you're talking about getting a new camera, you're going to notice your ISO is better. You're going to notice that the faster release on your shutter is better. You're going to notice a lot of new stuff. Yes. And remember, you can trade that camera in on a new used one. You can trade that camera in on a literal brand new one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I would ever let go of the camera I have.
Well, that's fine. You can always need two bodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
I've got a quick question, Kathy.
Sure.
And it has to do with bird photography. Everything I was looking at prior to taking this class said always use shutter priority.
Yeah.
I'm getting, you like aperture priority.
Yeah.
Most.
Yeah.
So that's a difference for me. So I'm going to make some changes.
Yeah, yeah. Shutter, you're going to find that aperture priority is just a whole lot faster and easier to use. We had this conversation. We always have this conversation when photographers get together, and we had it around the table over the weekend. And almost every professional photographer I know uses aperture priority. Yeah, there's a reason for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
And once you start working with it, you'll see. You'll go, oh, okay, I got it. I got it. I got it. Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, we have a class on, I have a class just on bird photography as well. But, you know, then there's a whole bunch of people that are saying set the shutter speed and then use the auto ISO. So there's all kinds of different combinations. Depends on what works for you. Yeah. Okay, Jane.
If I was interested in the flash class that's coming up, but I couldn't be present in the morning, could I go ahead and pay for it and then just get access to the recording?
You could do the recording, but it's a hands-on class. So I would kind of rather you be there.
Okay.
So I can see if we got any problems going on, and I'll offer it again. And is it better for you in the evening when I offer it again, or is it better in the morning?
If it's on a Wednesday, it's better in the evening.
Okay. Okay. Because sometimes all you have to do is ask me, and I'll put a class on just for
All
you.
right. Thank you. That's nice. Thank you.
So I'll
Great
do
class.
thank you very much. Okay. Anything else from anybody else? I have loved having you all, and I really do sincerely mean that. And simply because you did your homework like you were supposed to, and you have participated. And so I have really had you all. I can tell you're eager to learn and you're good students. So I thank you all very much for coming.
Thanks, Kathy. Good class.
Thanks.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I'll
And
share
I'm
the
going to take
recording.
those.
Yeah. One more thing. Yeah.
I'm
Jane.
sorry.
That's okay.
I'm going to take those water shots again and send them to you.
Okay. Do.
All right,
The
thanks.
Dropbox is still there.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Sure.
I noticed that you have a lot of photography interests. You have children and graduates and scenery and an ornament in your window and birds and all these things. You wouldn't even know I had children if you saw my pictures. All I take 99.9% of the time is birds.
Yeah.
I have 1 billion birds. It doesn't matter where in the world I am, for whatever reason, I only care about the birds. So that's pretty specific, but I also never have set a picture up. I just shoot what I see at the moment. And I'm wondering, I don't think I would have much interest in other topics. I just want to get better at shooting what I see when it comes to birds.
But what you're going to find is when you force yourself to do something else. Because I agree. I mean, you know, just give me a bird and that's all I want to photograph, you know. But when you force yourself to photograph something else and you get out of your comfort zone, you are now learning photography skills that are going to make you a better bird photographer. So by photographing and forcing yourself to learn how to use the flash, by photographing that crystal ball, for instance, and forcing yourself to learn how to do that, this gives you something to photograph at home in a setup situation where you can then transfer that to when we're out in the wild. So I have learned a lot over the years when I force myself to photograph a monarch chrysalis in my garage. You'd be surprised what you learn just from doing that. And
so the other day I noticed a Cooper's hawk up in a pine tree with an enormous nest. She had a lot of babies with her, but she's quite shaded by all of the tree.
Yeah.
And I try making settings where there's light balance. I try doing what we learned, and it was worthless for me. And I told my husband, I just got to get the picture. I got to go back to automatic and get the picture, because I didn't have a clue how to shoot that picture. So that's the kind of thing.
But that's one where after you learn how to use the Adobe products, you'll know that you could have used your shadow slider to bring her out of the shade.
What's an Adobe product, please?
That's the Photoshop or Lightroom. So they're all made by Adobe. So
I don't have those things.
Right. So come take the class and I'll show you, because in bird photography, many times the bird's in the shade. And so we can use our shadow slider and bring them out of the shade.
Do you, for your class, I should buy these things before the class, right?
It's a subscription, so you don't need to get it before class. In fact, because in class, I ask you just to watch, and then I refer you to some YouTube videos that I have available for you, so you can listen to me talk while you're processing your pictures. And so I would rather you have just come to class with a blank slate, then you can subscribe to the products.
Oh, my slate is so blank. It'll be perfect.
Good, good, good. Good. Yeah. Okay. Dave or Jim, any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Patricia, you ought to join the Houston Audubon. We do senior bird trips once a month.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That would be nice. I do spend a lot of time out on High Island, but I've never done a trip.
These are great because you get to go to places that maybe you hadn't heard of or had never been to. If you contact Mary Ann Weber at the Houston Audubon Raptor Education Center, she got me involved about a year ago.
Yeah.
And that got me involved into buying a decent camera. And the one I bought was used, but listed as in, excellent condition. So I saved money and was able to buy a nice photo lens.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, my friends, I'm going to let you all go for the day. Thank you all very much. I hope to see you in another class someday soon. Always remember, if you're buying equipment and you want my opinion on it, I will always give you my opinion and make sure you buy the right thing the first time instead of trying to have to buy it again. And then anytime you've got questions on photography or whatever, feel free to ask. I'm here. If I'm here, I'll answer. Yeah. Thank you all very much.
Great.
Okay.
And when is your Lightroom class?
I'm going to put it on the calendar. So watch my website. I'll put it on the calendar the next couple of days.
Your website's called what? Just Kathy Adams Clark?
It's right here on the screen right now. Yeah. And then there's my blog. If you want to read my blog about all kinds of different things as well. It has a search engine on it. So if you want to know about, macro photography or whatever, and it's got 2 blogs, the old one and the new one.
Thank you.
I thought
okay, guys. I will see you all.
Great pictures.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.